Coming up now on This Week in Wrestling, we're going to talk about how some of us are a little upset that Swerve Strickland didn't win the AEW title at Dynasty, but we're also not too disappointed that we're upset. And that makes all the sense in the world. We're also going to talk about the Young Bucks being back, the storyline developing between Cope and FDR, as well as all the latest developments leading up to WrestleMania and WWE. All that and more coming up now. Okay, let's have a chilled out, rational discussion about Swerve Strickland not winning the World Championship at AEW Dynasty and how we're all supposed to feel about that. Because they did everything in their power to convince us we were about to see a title change. Right at the end of that match, at the end of that 5-hour pay-per-view, they did everything they could think of to make every person watching at home, every person in the building, believe that they were about to see a title change. Perhaps the biggest example of this was Swerve Strickland's on the top turnbuckle, about to give the swerve stomp, but he pauses ever so slightly to give like an exhausted breath or something like that. He's kind of like, oh, you know, and it's just that little thing that only ever happens before big moments in wrestling. And it did happen before a big moment in wrestling, just not the one we thought we were going to see. We all thought that what we were about to see was Swerve Strickland win the championship, but what we actually got was the Young Bucks returning after like 4 months away, and what I believe is now the start of what will be a very long angle between Swerve and the Elite. And of course, with what happened on Dynamite, we know that one chapter of that story will be blood and guts, the War Games style match. The Bucks on one side, Swerve and his team on the other. So I thought this was an interesting kind of way to talk about when it's bad that our favorite wrestlers don't win, and when it's okay when our favorite wrestlers don't win. Because in wrestling, it's this weird thing where you're fans of people, you know. So there's fans of Swerve Strickland, there's fans of MJF, fans of Will Ospreay, and they want their favorites to win. And they know it's not a real sport in the sense that they're not really trying to pin their opponent's shoulders to the mat for 3 seconds. They know there's a person behind the curtain deciding who wins and who loses. So when they get upset that their favorite wrestler doesn't win, it's not like they can blame the general manager, they can blame the coach, they can blame the referee. They gotta blame the person behind the curtain who made the decision for them to not win. But if we always got everything that we wanted, wrestling wouldn't really be all that fun. Neither would sports. If your favorite sports team won the championship every year, and I'm sure some of you are thinking like, no, I'd love that. Okay, but if you went like 10 years and nothing that you didn't want to happen happened, it would get boring. But if you're watching wrestling in the way that it's intended to be watched in, you're not going to blame the booker, you're not going to blame the writers, you're going to be lost in the story. And in this case, you're going to blame the Young Bucks, because it was the Young Bucks in the story that prevented Swerve Strickland from winning the World Championship. So all that anger and disappointment that you're supposed to feel about Swerve not winning the world title, they want us to feel all that, but they want us to take all that bitterness and upset and anger and put it onto the Young Bucks. And so the Young Bucks had that heat during the storyline with Swerve and the Bucks. However long it goes, through Blood and Guts, through Double or Nothing, through All In, I don't know. I'm expecting it to be a very long storyline. I think something else that has contributed to there sort of being like a backlash against Swerve not winning at AEW Dynasty is that I think a lot of people are starting to tire of the Death Riders storyline, or they just believe kind of it's run its course, it's time to go. We talked about this a bit in the AEW Dynasty preview. On paper, the Death Riders storyline is perfect. It just hasn't translated to something that's landed with people on screen. So on paper, it makes all the sense in the world to do this storyline. You've got Jon Moxley, who has a very specific vision for pro wrestling. Like, if it was up to Jon Moxley, every single wrestling show would be a Josh Barnett's Bloodsport, which is fine. I love those shows. But if it was up to Jon Moxley, that's what, like, every show, well, maybe not every show, show. But like, that's the kind of wrestling that he's very into, very no nonsense, very straightforward, none of this flippy stuff. And so when the angle started, it was kind of like what you wanted the CM Punk versus the Elite storyline to be if it had ever happened, where you've got Jon Moxley is voicing the criticism that some have towards some AEW wrestlers, like your Orange Cassidys, your Top Flights, your Young Bucks. The guy's very influenced by the California indie scene, so a lot of lucha. And that runs counter to Jon Moxley's more straightforward approach to pro wrestling, where you don't do the cool looking move, you do the move that looks like it works. It looks like it knocks the opponent out. So one aspect of the Death Riders storyline that I think has led many to believe that the angle was stagnant like 3 weeks in was that it really hasn't evolved. Like, it really has been stagnant. When they laid the groundwork for the angle, that's all great, but nothing ever changed. Like, the groundwork is we're still in the same place now that we were when the angle started. And you don't necessarily have to do the whole episodic television approach that Paul Heyman's angles in WWE does, right? Like, a Paul Heyman angle in WWE is never stagnant. There's always a new thing every episode. So if you look at CM Punk, Roman Reigns, and Seth Rollins, and that little favor triangle that they have going on there, there's a new thing every show. First, they were all interfering in their matches. And then it was revealed that the match is going to main event, and Seth Rollins didn't like that. But then Punk reveals, well, that's not what the favor is. And then another episode, he reveals Paul Heyman is going to be in his court. Like, there's a new thing every episode. With the Death Riders angle, there's no new things. It's just the same groundwork that they laid out at the beginning. And again, that groundwork, I think, is a fantastic angle. But when it never evolves, it's easy to get tired of it. And I'm not saying you have to do everything episodically like they do in WWE. Or it's not just in WWE, by the way. The Young Bucks are like the masters at the episodic friendship angle in wrestling. That's what grew being the Elite when they were in Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling. So I'm not saying this is an AEW versus WWE thing. I think it's a Jon Moxley versus other types of wrestling type of thing. Obviously, I don't know how much of this angle is coming from Jon Moxley and how much of this angle is coming from Tony Khan. But I know in interviews that Moxley has given, he has said Tony Khan has sort of given him the reins to create this angle that he believes is going to turn the company around. And I do believe that in AEW, if you're someone who Tony Khan trusts, you have a history of being able to draw ratings or, be a marketable star, I do think Tony Khan will give you the chance to write your story, to write what you believe is like your Mona Lisa in wrestling, like the thing that you're going to be remembered for. And that's what that's kind of how Moxley would talk about this angle in the early days, is that like, this is my angle to turn this company around. And there's a lot of positives to the angle. The storyline, the groundwork that was laid out, beautiful. But it hasn't landed with fans. Like, it hasn't gotten the buzz around AEW that they've wanted it to. If you look at like what is drawing interest in AEW right now, nobody says the Death Rider storyline. And in a sense, this is probably the least hot that Jon Moxley has been in his entire time in AEW. So it just hasn't landed. That's not to say that there's not like artistic merit to the story that they were telling or anything like that. But, Matt Hardy was on his podcast the other day saying like, I think it's time for them to move on from this angle. And so some people felt like, hey, even if they had planned for Moxley to lose the title down the line, and they'd had this whole big grand plan with unveiling what was really in the briefcase and stuff like that, that maybe they would pivot and say, okay, we're going to put the title back on Swerve. And obviously they didn't do that. So I do believe that they have a plan for the briefcase, the end of Moxley's title run, and how the storyline ends or evolves into something else. And they don't want to move away from that. They've got their plan and they're going to keep with it. I do think that whatever they have planned that they're so excited about that they weren't going to pivot and put the title on Swerve, I do think it could be pretty good. So for those of you who have read Jon Moxley's book, first of all, Jon Moxley's book is fantastic. But Moxley is kind of him, Tony Khan, me, we're kind of in the same age range, you know? So we grew up with the same culture, and that really comes out in Jon Moxley's book. He talks a lot about different movies that he really likes, and while he doesn't mention this movie specifically, based on his age and the kind of stuff that he's into, I am certain that Jon Moxley is a huge fan of the movie Pulp Fiction, and that whatever is going on with the briefcase in AEW is similar to whatever was going on with the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. Okay, sticking with what happened at AEW Dynasty, I am very excited that the Young Bucks are back. It has been a long time since the Young Bucks have been in AEW. And to a certain extent, and I know the Young Bucks haters are going to hate this comment, but to a certain extent, I feel like it doesn't feel like AEW without the Young Bucks there. And part of that is, in the early days of AEW, to a certain extent, it felt like the Young Bucks were writing the whole show. And like leading up into AEW, one of the best shows for building wrestling angles was Being the Elite. When they were building up their storylines in Ring of Honor and New Japan on that show. And it felt like the major angles in AEW in 2019, 2020 were very similar to what we saw on Being the Elite. Obviously, the Young Bucks, Hangman, Cody, Kenny Omega, they were the big stars of the promotion back then. And it seems like after the whole fiasco with CM Punk and Brawl Out, and the Elite going away, being suspended, and CM Punk going away and then going to WWE eventually, it feels like it stopped being the Elite's company at that point and became Tony Khan's. So this is when it stopped being the Omega, Young Bucks, Hangman Page show, and you know, he would start signing guys like Will Ospreay, Kazuchika Okada, Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole. You know, those guys became the bigger stars at that point. But now with the Young Bucks back, and Kenny Omega back, and Hangman Page being back to kind of how he was before the Swerve Strickland storyline a little bit, back to being a bit more of a babyface, it feels like there's an opportunity for those four guys to kind of be the core of the organization again. Maybe not in the same way that they were, because other people have risen up to those roles, like a Swerve Strickland, for instance, but I feel like if the goal of AEW right now is to restore the feeling, the easiest way you're going to get there is more Young Bucks stuff. And in contrast to the Jon Moxley Death Riders stuff, the Young Bucks are very big on kind of episodic storytelling, right? Like they do the Paul Heyman thing of there's a new development each time you see a segment, each time you see them on a show. And that goes back to their Being the Elite days. There was always something going on one of those shows where it's like, well, does Cody Rhodes really think he's the leader of Bullet Club? Or wait, is Hangman Page gonna turn on us? And all the different psychology that would be in those shows. And actually, one of my personal favorite matches in AEW history, and one of the matches that has more psychology in it than I think you'll see in anything in the modern era, was, I believe it was AEW Revolution 2020. I'll double check this before posting, but where it was the Young Bucks versus Hangman Page and Kenny Omega, who were the tag champions at the time. And the storyline seemed like it was Hangman Page was about to break bad. Matt Jackson in particular was getting really frustrated at him. And the whole story of the match was like, are these guys who are friends, like, is their friendships gonna survive? / who gets to be the tag team champions? There was a ton of psychology in that match. And so to a certain extent, the Young Bucks are like the complete opposite of the Death Riders storyline. But now we've seen there might be an alliance forming between the Young Bucks, the Elite, and the Death Riders. And we saw this in the Young Bucks promo on Dynamite. They had mentioned like, hey, I don't think we're as different as you think we are. We both want what's best for AEW. So it seems like there could be some type of alliance building between the Elite and the Death Riders, which is interesting because they seem like they're polar opposites in many ways, right? And I don't know. So maybe the Elite and the Death Riders join forces against the Swerve Strickland team for Blood and Guts. I don't know. We've got a long way to go and a lot of different turns each storyline can take before we get there. So there's some other stuff going on in AEW that I wanted to talk about. I thought they did a great angle with FTR and Adam Copeland, where they lost the Trios Championship match. And at first, it looks like it's just Dax Harwood turning on Cope, but then Cash Wheeler joins. And so you've got Cash and Dax Wheeler have turned on Adam Copeland. They gave him a spike pile driver. He had to go out on a stretcher. They actually prevented him from going out on the stretcher first, which I thought was kind of funny. And so the storyline here is that FTR and Adam Copeland, everything that they've said about these guys in the last few months has been about how these guys are best friends. They live in the same town, and that town got ravaged by flooding, and they all work together to help those in their community in need. And boy, what a bunch of good friends they are. But then FTR turned on their friend. They turned on Cope. And now you're left wondering, well, does Cope have any other friends that could join him in this fight against FTR? I don't know. Are there any other friends that Cope may have left in AEW? Some old friends who maybe you've had some turmoil with? I don't know. I don't know what could happen. I mean, by the looks of it, Adam Copeland's never going to return to professional wrestling. He just can't with his neck injury. I also really like the ending of the Julia Hart versus Mercedes Moné match at AEW Dynasty because they found a great way to make Julia Hart seem like a winner even though she lost the match. So the end of the match is Moné has her in the statement maker, the bank statement, in her finishing move for a very long time. Everyone's expecting Julia Hart to tap out. She doesn't. She just holds on. She won't tap out. She won't give up. She won't give in. But then Moné counters into or adjusts into a cradle and pins her. So Moné wins the match. Moné is the winner of the match. She moves on in the tournament. But Julia Hart got sort of like a moral victory by not giving up. And so fans know, hey, we've still got a lot of reason to believe in this woman that she can one day come back and beat Mercedes Moné, and we know she's tough and all of these other good things that we now like about Julia Hart. So it was a cool ending, I thought. They also did an interesting ending with the Bandido Chris Jericho match, where they did the dusty finish, where it looks like, they've rung the bell. They've announced that Bandido lost the match, Chris Jericho won, and now Bandido's going to be unmasked. But then it's Bandido's family that points out that Jericho left a baseball bat by the stairs. The referee finds it, reverses the decision. And all of this, I have to imagine, was just done because heading into that match, I doubt many people at all believed that Bandido was going to lose his mask. That just didn't seem likely at all. But then they made us all believe that Bandido was about to lose his mask. So then they restart the match. Bandido ends up picking up the victory and he wins. So it was this little thing where I think they probably thought that nobody at all believed that Bandido was going to lose. So they had to do something to put, to draw some interest. And of course, when they announced that Bandido's lost, everybody's shocked. It's like, whoa, what? Are they really going to unmask Bandido? And nobody wanted that. So they were upset. And then they cheered when the match was restarted. So I don't know. I thought it was a cool way to make a match finish, like the finish of the match interesting when most people assumed they knew what the finish of the match was going to be. And, we talked during the preview about how Toni Storm needed to find like a way to beat the much bigger, more powerful opponent, sort of finding that, what's the word? pulling the rabbit out of a hat, a monkey wrench, one of those things to say that she just found a way to win the match. And she won with her big package. That's a small package that she refers to as a big package, which has been a pretty unbeatable part of her arsenal since she's come back. Also, the MJF and Hurt Syndicate storyline, I think, is starting to really develop well. So on the last Dynamite before Dynasty, basically Bobby Lashley had said, I don't think we're too into having MJF in the Hurt Syndicate. And MJF left that conversation believing he had to prove himself to them. So he then interferes in the match against Big Bill and Brian Keith at Dynasty, hits Big Bill with the Diamond Ring. This leads to the Hurt Syndicate retaining the titles. And then on Dynamite, MJF came out just kind of assuming he was in the group now, but still everyone but MVP voted against MJF being in the group. But MJF would be told later by MVP, hey, this is a business. You just got to find out what your customers want and then give it to them. So I think the implication was figure out what Shelton Benjamin and Bobby Lashley want from you and then give it to them. So that's what we're going to see from MJF for the next few weeks, I imagine, as this storyline continues. But I think I'm into this. I'm into this MJF pledging the Hurt Syndicate storyline. I think it's very good, and I'm really interested to see how it goes. I also like something that MJF said on AEW Dynamite this week when he kind of confirmed some headcanon that I have for the Owen Hart Foundation tournament. So MJF said during his promo with MVP and the rest of the Hurt Syndicate, hey, Tony Khan wanted me to enter the Owen. But I was like, what, wrestle every week like some schmuck? So that kind of confirmed for me why some people don't enter the Owen Hart tournament. MJF doesn't enter it because, what, I gotta win 4 matches to get my Triple B back? No, I'm about working smarter, not harder. And you would imagine that somebody like Chris Jericho would have the same idea. Like, what, I gotta wrestle 4 matches to get a title shot? No, not at this stage of my career. I'll wait to be given an opportunity in an eeasier way. So I liked that. I liked also that MJF felt he needed to give a reason as to why he wasn't in the Owen. And so it's good. I think we are moving closer to an AEW where everybody's goal is to go after the world title. All right, let's move on to WWE. And like many wrestling fans, I have some thoughts about John Cena and Cody Rhodes. Because I was thinking about what are the likely results from their match at WrestleMania? Like what exactly is going to happen at WrestleMania? And I figure there are 2 scenarios that are more likely than anything else. Well, I think there really are just 2 scenarios. One is that John Cena wins the World Championship, likely cheating to do so, and goes on a Hollywood Hogan-style run all the way leading up to his retirement. Because remember, the angle is he's going to win the title at WrestleMania and then retire with it. So if he's not retiring to the end of this calendar year. So that could be the story for the rest of 2025 is he's got the title, somebody's got to take it away from him. The other possible storyline, I'm not sure I like this one quite as much. I think I like the first one better, but the other one is that John Cena loses to Cody Rhodes clean at WrestleMania, and the night after WrestleMania, or somewhere down the line, John Cena reveals that this was all a test to see if Cody Rhodes really is the next John Cena. And it could be a bit of a cop-out for them where Cena goes, look, I didn't mean any of those things that I said about the WWE fans and the WWE universe. I love them all. I just needed to know that Cody Rhodes was the kind of hero that they deserve, who will stand up for them against a threat, the likes of The Rock. I could see them doing something like that. And I mean, it would be the equivalent of a TV show revealing that the last 3 episodes have all just been a dream. Right? Like, it would just cancel out all of this other stuff that we saw and went on an emotional journey with. So there's a part of me worried that that's where they're going. Like that the John Cena heel turn ends the night after WrestleMania. And he reveals that it was all some big test for Cody Rhodes. I sort of got that in my head while watching the show the other day. I was like, oh God, no. No, don't do that. They might do that. But maybe they'll do the John Cena Hollywood Hogan run as well. I guess we will have to see. But regardless, I mean, it's a fun storyline to follow. Right now, anyway. And then we talked a bit about the Punk Roman Seth Rollins storyline, what's going on there, and how there's always a new development with every angle, with every segment on every show. So like on Raw, Seth Rollins could have given Paul Heyman the curb stomp, but then stopped and told Heyman, well, now you owe me a favor. So we don't know what that favor is going to be. And it's just going to be like that as we move closer to WrestleMania. Every stop on the road is going to have a storyline development, which, as we've said, is sort of the opposite of what the Death Riders storyline is. I still think that they need some reason for this match to be the main event. It still is a little weird to me that Punk can not win the Royal Rumble, not win the Elimination Chamber, and then just be given the WrestleMania main event when like Jey Uso won the Royal Rumble and is challenging for the world title. I do feel that they need to explain that somewhat. They need to explain why this big achievement is on the table for these guys in a non-title match where it's not being given to people that won the match that they didn't win. Like, they need to explain why this match, main event over Gunther versus Jey Uso. But it's the angle they're going with. And, you know, the story is that Seth Rollins is really mad that Punk is just being given a WrestleMania main event. So, like, my complaint factors into the story. Like, they're paying attention to it. So, I mean, we'll see how it all develops. But it's definitely in the last few weeks, they've done a lot more to make you interested in the match. And kind of on the Gunther versus Jey Uso storyline, we talked a couple of weeks ago, I think, about how Gunther attacking Jimmy Uso and bloodying up Jimmy Uso is that thing that gives Jey Uso, that starts him on his arc, on his character arc, where he's here and then he's here. Because he's lost 3 matches to Gunther on WWE television. For the Intercontinental title, for the World title. 3 times, WWE fans have seen Gunther beat Jey Uso on their TV. Jey Uso needs something. He needs something to lead you to believe he can overcome an obstacle that he previously has not been able to overcome. And he spoon-fed it for people this week. He didn't leave any subtleties to it. Like we talked about how what happened last week. But this week, he just spelled out what happened for Gunther. He said, now I'm not wrestling just for me. I'm wrestling for Jimmy. I'm wrestling for my family. So we know that Jay's got way more motivation now than in any of those 3 previous matches. And you saw that on Gunther's face. Gunther looked gotten to in a way that he clearly wasn't in their first 3 matches. So Gunther sees this character change in Jey Uso. And for the first time in this storyline, Gunther is worried. That's a pretty good character arc. But we have to see how that all plays out now when they go to the actual match. Other big WWE news this week concerned Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton having a segment that kind of, the dirt sheets, the insider reports say that this was all unscripted. Well, not all unscripted, but that the segments have gone off the rails. People have gone off script. And so the first time we had an interview segment with Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton, it was like an on-camera thing, like they weren't live in front of the crowd. And Charlotte didn't do much to build up Tiffany as like a big threat to her. Talked about how Tiffany only won the title by cashing in Money in the Bank. Like really kind of, MVP did something very similar to Brian Keith and Big Bill not too long ago, where it's like you're building up the match, but you're running down your opponent. And of course you're going to run down your opponent, but you're doing it in a way where the audience sees them as lesser as a result, right? Like, if you run down your opponent in a way where you are also kind of building them up as a threat, where, like, if Charlotte Flair had said to Tiffany Stratton, look, you're the women's world champion, you were really smart to cash in the Money in the Bank when you did, and God, you're an incredible athlete, but guess what? You're only second best in the division because I'm back now. That then, it builds up Tiffany as a great wrestler while Charlotte is still appearing to be, egotistical and insulting to their opponent. So, like, Charlotte didn't do that. She was just insulting to her opponent and running her down. So then we get this segment on SmackDown last week where they're both in the ring together. And, it feels like maybe Tiffany Stratton said to herself, okay, this time I need to protect myself. Like, if she goes off script and starts saying things that I don't like about me, I'm going to do the same to her. And again, I don't know that they were going off script. This could be the whole work shoot thing that they want to do leading up to WrestleMania. But they're definitely feeding information to the insider news sites that this was off script, a segment that went off the rails. These two don't like each other, that kind of thing. They're, that's what they want us all to believe. And it might be the case. It definitely could be the case. Might not be the case, but it definitely could be the case. So Charlotte kind of did some similar stuff in this. She made fun of Tiffany having a squeaky voice. But then Tiffany just went to town and Charlotte brought up how she's 0 for 3 in her marriages, bringing up that, she was recently divorced from Andrade and that's her third divorce now. So bringing up that, which not all of the audience might be aware of. And so the idea was that Tiffany held her own and clapped back and stood up for herself against Charlotte Flair. And now this has just led to everyone supporting Tiffany Stratton over Charlotte Flair even more. Charlotte is getting a lot of heat. The fans are very behind Tiffany. It feels like Charlotte Flair's reaction to the crowd last Friday night was frustration. I feel like to a certain extent, Charlotte wants to be cheered. She wants to be loved, but she's not. She's got tremendous heel heat and hate, but that there's a part of Charlotte Flair that wants to be the top babyface, but a large percentage of the fans aren't going to let that happen. And that maybe that's a source of legitimate frustration for Charlotte. I think that's possible, yeah. And then finally, the last WWE thing to talk about is Kevin Owens is going to be out for like a year. He's going to go have neck surgery. And so his storyline with Randy Orton seems completely out the window. Now, we saw Randy Orton give an RKO to Nick Aldis. I'm kind of wondering if Nick Aldis gets in the ring and is Owens' replacement maybe at WrestleMania. Like, is there a chance of that happening? That would be kind of cool to see Nick Aldis finally wrestle in WWE. But pretty sad stuff. I think everybody kind of accepts, even if Owens is a bad guy and we all hate him, he does a lot to make the show very entertaining. So a year without Kevin Owens definitely kind of sucks. Okay, so just to close off this week, because of the AEW pay-per-view, we didn't get a chance to get to a lot of stuff. The non-AEW, non-WWE stuff. There was a lot of great stuff to check out this week. New Japan Pro Wrestling, Hiroki Goto defeated David Finlay to retain his title. He's now going to face Shota Umino next. We've got the Best of the Super Juniors coming up in May, and we've got AEW's Kevin Knight and Nick Wayne are going to be in that tournament. Kevin Knight, I mean, he's with New Japan too. He's been in the last 3 tournaments, but he's going to be in the Best of the Super Juniors. That's cool. MLW had Battle Riot 7 over the weekend, and I thought that was a really good show too. Like, I just watched the Battle Riot match, but MLW is one of those companies where if there weren't so many other companies, I think they would be getting more buzz around them. Like, if wrestling fans had more time to check out different products, I think MLW would be one that would start to rise to the top of the second tier a little bit. I mean, when I watch it, I'm like, this is better than TNA. This is better than NWA. This is, MLW. If you really liked ECW, in a sense, MLW is the closest thing to it currently, Like, I think if ECW was your jam, you might really like MLW and you might consider checking it out. But that's going to do it for this video, everyone. I will see you again next week, and we will put up some breaking news shorts throughout the week as we go. So thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you again next week.